What if I told you that The Chosen is about to show us the most emotional, painful, and unforgettable chapter in the entire story of Jesus? After years of watching his journey, his miracles, his teachings, and the incredible bond he built with his followers, we're finally approaching the moment that changes everything. And if the first trailer and sneak peek for The Chosen Crucifixion Episode 1 are any indication, we're about to witness scenes unlike anything this series has ever given us before. The tension is rising, the danger is closing in from every direction, and for the first time, it feels like every character knows that something terrible is about to happen. But what exactly did the trailer reveal? Which emotional moments are hidden inside those brief scenes? And what clues suggest that Episode 1 could be one of the most heartbreaking episodes in the history of The Chosen? Get ready, because today we're breaking down everything we saw in the trailer and sneak peek, and trust me, some of these details are much bigger than they first appear. The very first thing that stood out to me in the trailer is the overwhelming feeling of tension surrounding Jesus. Throughout previous seasons, we've seen opposition against him grow stronger and stronger, but this time it feels completely different. The trailer makes it clear that the situation has reached a point where there is no easy way out anymore. From the moment the footage begins, you can almost feel the pressure building around Jesus and his disciples. What's especially interesting is how calm Jesus appears despite everything happening around him. While fear, uncertainty, and confusion seem to be affecting everyone else, Jesus continues to carry himself with the same peace we've seen throughout the series. And honestly, I think that contrast is going to make Episode 1 even more emotional. We know what is coming. The disciples may not fully understand it yet, but the audience certainly does. Every conversation suddenly feels more important. Every look between the characters feels more meaningful. Every moment carries extra weight because we know that the darkest chapter of the story is about to begin. One of the biggest clues from the trailer is the growing concern among Jesus' followers. We can already see signs that many of them are struggling to understand what is happening around them. For years they believed they were following the Messiah who would transform everything. They witnessed impossible miracles. They saw the blind receive sight. They watched people rise from sickness and even death. They saw crowds gather wherever Jesus went. Yet now they find themselves facing a situation that doesn't make sense to them. Instead of victory, danger is approaching. Instead of celebration, fear is spreading. Instead of certainty, confusion is growing. And I think Episode 1 is going to explore those emotions in a very powerful way. What makes this even more heartbreaking is that Jesus has repeatedly warned them about what lies ahead. He's spoken about suffering. He's spoken about sacrifice. He's spoken about events that many of his followers simply didn't want to believe. And now it seems those warnings are beginning to become reality. The trailer gives us the feeling that some disciples are finally starting to realize that Jesus wasn't speaking symbolically. He wasn't exaggerating. He was preparing them for something real. Something painful. Something that would test their faith more than ever before. Another detail that immediately caught my attention is the atmosphere surrounding Jerusalem itself. The city no longer feels welcoming. Instead, it feels tense and unpredictable. The trailer creates a sense that powerful people are making decisions behind closed doors while ordinary people remain unaware of how serious the situation has become. And that's exactly what makes the suspense so effective. We know forces are moving against Jesus. We know important leaders are watching him closely. We know plans are being formed. But the question is how quickly everything will unfold once those plans are set into motion. At the same time, the trailer also reminds us of something important about Jesus' character. Even as danger increases, he continues focusing on the people around him. That's something The Chosen has always done exceptionally well. Instead of presenting Jesus as distant from human emotions, the series constantly shows his compassion, his understanding, and his love for others. And based on what we've seen so far, Episode 1 seems ready to highlight those qualities once again. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the most emotional scenes in the episode involve quiet conversations rather than dramatic confrontations. Sometimes the most powerful moments in The Chosen aren't the biggest scenes. They're the personal moments between characters that reveal what they're truly feeling. As I watched the trailer, I couldn't help but notice how much emphasis seems to be placed on the relationships between Jesus and his disciples. That makes perfect sense because this chapter of the story isn't only about what happens to Jesus. It's also about what happens to the people who love him most. Imagine being one of the disciples during these events. Imagine seeing the growing hostility. Imagine hearing the rumors. Imagine feeling powerless to stop what seems inevitable. I think Episode 1 is going to put us directly into that emotional experience, allowing us to feel the fear and uncertainty right alongside the characters. And then there's the sneak peek itself, which seems designed to remind us that the clock is ticking. Every passing moment brings Jesus closer to the events that will define this season. Every conversation feels like it could be one of the last peaceful moments before everything changes forever. That's what makes the trailer so effective. It doesn't rely on huge action sequences or shocking surprises. Instead, it creates suspense through anticipation. We already know the destination, but watching the journey unfold is what makes it so powerful. Honestly, I think that's why The Chosen Crucifixion has the potential to become the most emotional season the series has ever produced. For years, viewers have grown attached to these characters. We've celebrated with them, laughed with them, and cried with them. Now we're about to experience the moment that will challenge every single one of them. And if episode 1 is only the beginning, then I can only imagine how intense the rest of this journey is going to become. Because based on everything we've seen in the trailer so far, one thing is already clear. The peace we've known throughout much of this story is coming to an end, and the storm is finally beginning to arrive. As intense as the overall atmosphere of the trailer is, I think the most fascinating part of episode 1 could be the emotional battle taking place inside the disciples themselves. One thing The Chosen has always done better than almost any other biblical series is showing us that these followers of Jesus were real people with real fears, real doubts, and real struggles. And based on everything we've seen so far, episode 1 looks ready to put those struggles front and center. The trailer gives us the feeling that everyone is beginning to sense that something is wrong, even if they can't fully explain it. There is a growing uneasiness hanging over every interaction, and honestly, that feeling alone creates so much suspense. What makes this especially powerful is that many of the disciples have spent years believing they understood where this journey was leading. They left behind their old lives to follow Jesus. They sacrificed careers, families, and security because they believed they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. And they were right. But now they're being forced to face a reality they never expected. The kingdom Jesus spoke about doesn't look the way they imagined it would. Instead of watching their leader rise to political power, they're watching powerful enemies close in around him. Instead of seeing opposition disappear, they're seeing it grow stronger every day. And I think episode 1 is going to explore that conflict in a very emotional way. The trailer also seems to hint that Jesus' closest followers are not all reacting the same way. Some appear concerned. Some seem confused. Others look determined to stand beside him no matter what happens. And that's exactly what makes these characters so interesting. They aren't perfect heroes who always know the right thing to do. They're ordinary people trying to understand extraordinary events. That's something viewers can connect with on a very personal level. If we were in their position, would we understand what Jesus was trying to tell us? Would we recognize the signs? Or would we be just as confused as they are? One disciple I find especially interesting heading into the season is Simon Peter. Throughout The Chosen, we've watched him grow tremendously as both a follower and a leader. He's passionate, loyal, and willing to take risks for Jesus. But he's also emotional and impulsive. The trailer seems to suggest that Peter is carrying a tremendous amount of pressure. Deep down, he wants to protect Jesus. He wants to help. He wants to stop whatever danger is coming. But the closer these events get, the more he may realize that this is a situation he cannot control. And honestly, I think that's going to lead to some incredibly powerful moments. At the same time, the trailer appears to show that Jesus himself remains remarkably calm despite everything happening around him. That's one of the details I keep coming back to. Everyone else seems anxious about the future, yet Jesus appears completely aware of what lies ahead. Not because he's unaware of the pain that's coming, but because he understands the purpose behind it. And I think Jonathan Remi's performance could be absolutely incredible in these scenes. We've already seen him portray compassion, joy, sorrow, and strength throughout the series. But this season may require him to deliver some of the most emotionally complex performances we've ever seen from him. Another thing that stood out to me is how much emphasis the trailer places on relationships. As strange as it may sound, I don't think episode 1 is going to be focused primarily on the crucifixion itself. Instead, I think it's going to focus on everything that makes the crucifixion matter. The friendships. The loyalty. The trust. The love between these characters. Because when audiences care deeply about the people involved, every painful moment becomes even more powerful. And after spending years with these characters, viewers are more emotionally invested than ever before. The sneak peek also gives the impression that several important conversations are about to take place. Conversations that could completely change how certain characters view the situation. That's one reason why I think episode May 1st contains some surprisingly emotional dialogue. Some of the biggest moments might not involve large crowds or dramatic confrontations. Instead, they may happen during quiet exchanges where characters are forced to confront difficult truths they've been avoiding. And honestly, those moments often become the scenes that stay with viewers long after an episode ends. What's particularly heartbreaking is that many of the disciples still seem to be holding on to hope that somehow everything will work out. They want to believe that Jesus will overcome every obstacle the way he always has before. After all, they've witnessed miracle after miracle. They've seen situations that appeared hopeless suddenly transformed. So from their perspective, why should this situation be any different? But as viewers, we know the answer. We know that this story is moving toward one of the most painful moments in human history. And that knowledge creates a sense of suspense that hangs over every scene. The trailer does an excellent job of reminding us that sometimes the scariest moments aren't the ones where something terrible is happening right now. Sometimes the scariest moments are the ones where you know something terrible is coming, but you don't know exactly when it will arrive. That's the feeling episode 1 seems to be creating. Every scene feels like it's building toward something bigger. Every conversation feels like it's carrying hidden significance. Every moment feels like another step closer to a point of no return. And perhaps that's what excites me most about this episode. The Chosen has never simply rushed through major biblical events. Instead, it takes time to show us how those events affected the people living through them. It allows us to experience the emotions, fears, hopes, and struggles of the characters. Based on this trailer and sneak peek, it looks like episode 1 is going to continue that approach in a spectacular way. The tension is building. The uncertainty is growing. The disciples are beginning to realize that their world may be about to change forever. And if that's the emotional foundation being established in the very first episode, then I honestly can't imagine how intense the rest of the season is going to become. Because from everything we've seen so far, the hardest chapter of their journey is only just beginning. As the trailer continues, one of the biggest questions that immediately comes to mind is just how close Jesus' enemies are to making their move. And honestly, I think this is where episode 1 could become incredibly suspenseful. Throughout previous seasons, we've watched opposition build slowly in the background. Religious leaders questioned Jesus. Some challenged his teachings. Others became increasingly frustrated by the growing crowds following him. But now it feels like those tensions have reached a breaking point. The trailer creates the feeling that important decisions are being made behind the scenes, and the people making those decisions are running out of patience. What's particularly interesting is that the trailer doesn't need to show us every detail to create that sense of danger. Sometimes what we don't see is even more effective than what we do see. There is this constant feeling that forces are moving in the shadows. Plans are developing. Conversations are happening. And while many ordinary people continue going about their lives, powerful individuals seem focused on one goal above all else, stopping Jesus. That growing threat hangs over the entire trailer and makes every scene feel more intense. At the center of all this is Jesus himself. And what amazes me most is how differently he responds compared to everyone else around him. The people who oppose him seem driven by fear, anger, and desperation. The disciples are struggling with confusion and uncertainty. Yet Jesus continues moving forward with complete confidence. Not because the situation isn't serious, but because he understands something that others do not. He knows where this journey is leading. And honestly, I think that knowledge is going to make some of the upcoming scenes incredibly emotional to watch. The trailer also seems to hint that Jesus is spending precious time with those closest to him. And when you think about it, that makes these moments even more heartbreaking. Every conversation suddenly feels more meaningful. Every piece of advice feels more important. Every moment shared with the disciples feels like something they will remember for the rest of their lives. The closer we get to the crucifixion, the more valuable these interactions become. And I wouldn't be surprised if episode 1 contains several scenes that viewers will find themselves revisiting again and again. One thing that really stood out to me is how exhausted some of the characters appear. Not necessarily physically, but emotionally. They've been through so much already. They've witnessed miracles beyond imagination. They've faced opposition. They've traveled countless miles. They've sacrificed almost everything to follow Jesus. And now they seem to be carrying a burden that is becoming heavier with each passing day. The trailer captures that feeling beautifully. You can sense that many of these characters are trying to remain hopeful, but deep down they know something significant is approaching. I also think episode may first spend a lot of time showing the contrast between public appearances and private emotions. On the surface, some characters may appear strong and confident. But internally, they could be wrestling with fear and uncertainty. That's something The Chosen has always handled exceptionally well. The series understands that faith doesn't eliminate struggle. In many cases, it exists alongside struggle. And as these events continue to unfold, I think we're going to see characters pushed to emotional limits they've never experienced before. Another detail I found fascinating is how the trailer seems to emphasize the growing isolation around Jesus. Even though he is surrounded by followers, there is a sense that he alone fully understands what is coming. Imagine carrying that knowledge while continuing to comfort everyone around you. Imagine knowing the pain ahead while still choosing to encourage others. Honestly, that's one of the aspects of Jesus' story that has always moved people so deeply. And if the trailer is any indication, episode 1 is going to explore that emotional reality in a very powerful way. At the same time, we can't forget about the growing uncertainty among the wider crowd. For years, people have been gathering to hear Jesus teach. They've watched him heal the sick and perform miracles that seemed impossible. Many believe he is exactly who he claims to be. Others remain skeptical. But as tensions rise, it feels like public opinion itself is becoming a battlefield. The trailer suggests that confusion is spreading everywhere. Some people may still be filled with hope, while others are beginning to question everything they've heard. And that uncertainty only adds more suspense to the story. The sneak peek becomes even more interesting when you consider how close we are to the events that will define this entire season. Every episode from this point forward carries enormous weight. There are no filler moments anymore. There are no unimportant conversations. Everything matters. Every decision matters. Every reaction matters. Every choice made by every character could have major consequences. And I think viewers are going to feel that pressure from the very beginning of episode 1. Honestly, one of the reasons I'm so excited about this season is because The Chosen has earned these moments. The emotional impact isn't coming simply because we know the biblical story. It's coming because we've spent years getting to know these characters as people. We've watched Matthew grow. We've watched Peter struggle and learn. We've watched Mary Magdalene rebuild her life. We've watched friendships form and deepen. That's why the events ahead feel so personal. They're not happening to strangers. They're happening to characters we've come to care about deeply. And as the trailer reaches some of its most dramatic moments, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The sense of inevitability is growing stronger. No matter how much the disciples hope for a different outcome, no matter how much they want things to return to normal, the story is moving forward. The storm is getting closer. The tension is becoming impossible to escape. And if episode 1 truly captures the emotional weight suggested by this trailer, then I think we're about to witness one of the most powerful openings The Chosen has ever delivered. Because the closer we get to the crucifixion, the more we realize that every peaceful moment is becoming precious, and every step forward is bringing these characters closer to a future none of them are fully prepared to face. But as emotional as the disciples' journey may be, I think the most powerful part of episode 1 could be seeing how Jesus prepares himself for what is about to happen. And honestly, this is where the trailer becomes truly fascinating. Rather than focusing entirely on the danger surrounding him, the footage seems to place a huge emphasis on Jesus' mindset during these final days. While everyone else is worried about what might happen next, Jesus appears completely focused on what needs to be done. And that contrast creates some of the most compelling tension we've seen in The Chosen so far.